Most modern electric vehicles seem to set out with the goal of being noticed. The Toyota BZ4X's styling is bold and brash. The Tesla Model Y looks like a bee-stung egg. And the Ford Mustang Mach-E squeezes a horse-load of Mustang heritage into a compact crossover. But what if you're looking for something that isn't quite so bold? There's an advantage to running a bit under the radar while still looking fashionable and futuristic. If that's your cup of tea, then you might want to consider looking at the 2022 Volkswagen ID.4. The ID.4 is a compact crossover available in either rear or all-wheel drive. The model we're testing this week is the Pro version with all-wheel drive, which is the entry-level trim. As we found, despite its bare-bones price, it does come with most of the features you'd want. It has Volkswagen's IQ Drive driver assistance technology, including blind spot monitoring, lane centering, and travel assist. That last one keeps you centered in the lane, while adaptive cruise control keeps you pacing the vehicle in front of you. There's Volkswagen's Discover Pro infotainment system here too. It has a 10-inch display, which is big enough to read clearly, and it supports wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. There's even a wireless phone charger built into the console. Upgraded models get a larger infotainment screen, adaptive headlights, 12-way power seats, and fake leather. The only thing that we really miss on the base model from the upgraded trims we previously tested is the power opening and closing rear liftgate. The Pro model is manual. The ID.4 Pro all-wheel drive has an EPA estimated range of 251 miles, which equates to approximately 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour. Driving a driving loop at rural, highway, and city speeds, we averaged about 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour. We anticipate the 82 kilowatt hour battery pack to have a range of approximately 221 miles in normal springtime driving. The all-wheel drive model is better for winter driving, but Volkswagen doesn't include a heat pump for more efficient heating of the cabin. But what Volkswagen does give you on the all-wheel drive model is a heated windshield to quickly defrost or de-ice it on a cold morning. Plus, the Pro all-wheel drive has heated seats and a heated steering wheel, making it easier to warm up without having to exclusively use the cabin heater. While we would still like to see the inclusion of a heat pump, it's nice to have these other items standard. Charging the ID.4 is simple. With a level 2 home charger, VW states you can add approximately 23 to 34 miles of range per hour of charging. On a DC fast charger, that grows to 64 miles in just 10 minutes. VW states a maximum charging rate of 130 kilowatts, and when we tested charging on a model last year, we were happy with the continuous charge rate and charging curve. We wish the number was higher, but that won't happen until VW adopts 800-volt charging on its MEB models. The ID.4 is a family-focused EV with tons of space up front for passengers and ample rear seat legroom for most adults. Additionally, you should be able to fit a bulky rear-facing child seat without issues. Plus, the ISOFIX anchors are easy to get to and the cover is attached so you don't lose them. The rear cargo area is nice and big thanks to a traditional crossover shape and large boot opening. The ID.4 has 30.3 cubic feet of space with the rear seats in place. Driving the ID.4 is an uneventful experience. The dual motor setup has 295 horsepower and 339 pound-feet of torque. That helps get this battery-equipped people mover up to highway speeds smoothly and briskly. It's not as quick as some of its competitors, but those coming from something like a Tiguan will be surprised at how swift it is. The ID.4 is more highway cruiser than canyon carver. The suspension is soft, and the car rolls noticeably during turns. The low center of gravity from the battery pack does help some of the cornering, but it's no sports car. Bumps, potholes, and other road imperfections are quickly dispatched. It's also quiet at highway speeds, with only a little bit of wind noise coming from the tires and the front mirrors. It feels quite serene compared to the cabin noise of a Tesla Model 3 at similar speeds. Our biggest complaint about the vehicle is all the darn touch-sensitive buttons. The steering wheel mounted controls are both physical buttons and also touch-sensitive. It's hard to tell if the function you're trying to perform requires a full press or slide of the finger. The climate controls aren't backlit and are also touch-sensitive. While you can see them with your eyes in the daylight to operate, at nighttime they become invisible. There's also no volume knob, but rather another non-backlit slider that you can't see when it's dark. Also, and perhaps most baffling, is that there are only 2 power window buttons. If you want to roll the rear windows down, you must press the touch-sensitive button marked rear, and then one of the window buttons. It makes no sense. The infotainment screen itself is pretty to look at, but the menus are still a bit slow to operate. It's improved from earlier versions we experienced, but it's still near the bottom of the pack in ease of operation. You're going to want to use your phone most of the time. The ID.4 is still a good family hauler, and compared to the competition, it fares well in several key areas. For cargo capacity, the Mustang Mach-E has 29.7 cubic feet of storage behind the rear seats. The Tesla Model Y, with 2 rows of seats, has 30.2 cubic feet of storage. Volkswagen's offering wins, just, with 30.3 cubes. When it comes to range, the ID.4 doesn't do quite as good, however. Equipped with all-wheel drive, the Mach-E has a maximum EPA-rated range of 277 miles. The Model Y only comes in all-wheel drive and has a maximum range of 330 miles. If you were taking notes earlier, you know the ID.4 takes last place in this round with 251 miles of range. Of course, thanks to the global chip shortage, finding any of these cars can be a challenge. Here are some of the things we liked, and didn't, about the 2022 Volkswagen ID.4 Pro with all-wheel drive. We like the quietness and roominess of the cabin. We also like that all-wheel drive isn't a costly upgrade. The ride quality on the highway is also excellent. Unfortunately, we're not fans of the infotainment system or the touch-sensitive buttons. We get what Volkswagen was going for, but they don't work as well as they look. Overall, if you're looking for an EV that doesn't call attention to itself, but has the latest safety tech and tons of space, you're going to want to give the VW ID.4 a test drive. For more electrified coverage, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We have tons of new content in the works, so ring that notification bell too, and you won't miss a single upload. Get even more buying advice and takes on the latest and greatest in EVs at evpulse.com. Thanks for watching.
This is an answer to a question nobody asked. I didn't ask it. I know you didn't ask it out there in internet land. But engineers were just trying to be too clever, and they got caught. By me. Here we have a 2023 Volkswagen ID.4S rear-wheel drive. Let's see what's new with this all-electric SUV and find out if it is worth your consideration. So visual changes for the latest model year are pretty minor. Up front we can see some gloss black accents on the face of the ID.4, and I think these do a great job of breaking up the front end. Additionally, 3 new wheel designs are available, and then S models of this vehicle also gain an illuminated rear Volkswagen badge, but really, that's about it. Up front, of course, we also have LED headlamps with LED daytime running lights, and then we've got LED tail lamps at the back of the vehicle. S versions also gain adaptive front lighting elements, so those will turn as you steer the wheel, a great feature to have. Moving along the side, we can see beautiful paint. This is called Aurora Red Metallic. I think it absolutely pops in the sunshine here, and it's only $395 extra. And as before, we can see this is a very clean and elegant design. I quite like the looks of the ID.4, and I especially like this character line that sort of kicks up at the rear. Really makes the vehicle look like it's leaning forward and ready to pounce, just like a cat. Overall, the coefficient of drag with this vehicle is between 0.27 and 0.28, so it is a fairly slippery design. At the rear, however, again, not much has changed, but you can see this is the badge that would light up at night on S trim levels. Popping the hatch here, which you can do just like that, reveals a fairly generous cargo area. This is about 30.3 cubic feet of room. There is some space underneath the floor as well. It's probably a little bit hard to see in that harsh sunlight, but 30.3 cubic feet, though if you fold those second row backrests down, which I'm not going to do because there are no levers in the cargo hold to do that, but drop those, and the number increases to about 64.2 cubic feet, a fairly generous number. But unfortunately, there is no front trunk in the ID.4. If you pop the hood, there's just a bunch of powertrain hardware. Back up front, there's some important powertrain news to talk about. If I pop the hood here, throw the prop rod up, engineers have made a new, smaller 62 kilowatt hour battery pack available for the latest model year to, of course, help lower this vehicle's price. Though if you do want more range, you can still get the ID.4 with a larger 82 kilowatt hour pack. As for DC fast charging performance, the smaller battery tops out at 140 kilowatts, which is okay, though the larger one will do 170, which is pretty good these days, and enough to get you from 10 to 80% in just about 30 minutes. As for the battery warranty, it is 8 years or 100,000 miles, and that covers both defects and degradation to a 70% state of charge. And finally, if you do get a new ID.4, they also come standard with 3 years of unlimited 30-minute charging sessions with Electrify America. So you're taking a road trip or something, you should be able to just plug in and not have to worry about paying for any juice. As for range, that larger battery pack will get you up to 275 miles on a charge, which is pretty good, though we do typically like to see at least 300 miles off of a full battery because it gives you a little bit of extra wiggle room. However, ID.4 is fitted with the smaller 62 kilowatt hour pack, which is what we have here, top out at just 209 miles on a full charge, which frankly is not all that great. Next up, performance. Rear-wheel drive ID.4s feature a single permanent magnet electric motor that is, surprise, surprise, mounted at the back axle. And that thing provides up to 201 horsepower and 229 pound-feet of torque, which is enough for good, if not stellar performance. All-wheel drive versions of this SUV gain an additional front-mounted induction motor. We don't have that here, so just pretend there's an extra electric motor somewhere in there. But all-wheel drive versions of the ID.4 are graced with 295 horses and 339 pounds of twist, which is enough to get you from 0 to 60 in less than 6 seconds, which is a legitimately quick time. So inside, the biggest change for 2023 is right here. Every version of this SUV now comes standard with a 12-inch infotainment screen, and I've got to say it's pretty crisp and colorful. Plus, of course, it supports Apple CarPlay and Android Auto if you prefer to use a smartphone mirroring system. However, I will say this is not one of my favorite multimedia arrays that is out there today. Engineers did work to make the menus more intuitive, but I still find it confusing. There's a lot going on here, and this isn't necessarily the most responsive system out there. It's better than it was, but it's definitely not my first choice. Also, this is something we've complained about in the past, but it's still present in the ID.4. We have touch sliders on the dashboard for the dual zone climate control system and the audio volume. And you can see they are quite responsive, as you can see. Let's lower that so we don't get copyright infringements or anything. But why have sliders, especially ones that aren't illuminated at night where you can't see them? Just put a knob. Like, it's a lot simpler and easier to use. Additionally, if you go to turn on either the heated seat or the heated steering wheel, it takes multiple taps. You've got to bring up the climate control menu, and then you can turn on either of those heated functions. And that's just an extra step, I think. However, the good news is you've got 3 levels of adjustability for each of those, and these heated seats and the heated steering wheel are both extremely effective. They do get very warm, which of course is a good thing. If you're directly heating your body, you don't have to run the HVAC system as much, which will reduce range if you're cranking the heat up, especially since the ID.4 does not have a heat pump in the HVAC system. The window switches are also kind of confusing in the ID.4 because instead of just having 4 individual rockers like you would have in, I don't know, literally every other 4-door vehicle with windows that roll down, Volkswagen engineers were a bit too clever for their own good because they only put 2 window switches in here. So you can lower or raise, of course, the front windows very easily, but if you want to drop the back windows, you've got to hit a touch control that illuminates and says rear, then you can lower those windows. I know their data says that very few people lower the rear windows when they're driving, but still, this is just needlessly complex. Just install 4 switches. It ain't that expensive or complicated, and it makes your life much easier. One thing I really like about this vehicle's interior is called the ID light system, and basically it's an illuminated strip right at the base of the windshield, and that will light up to give certain warnings to the driver. Turn-by-turn directions or maybe emergency braking prompts, that will pop up in your peripheral vision. So even if you're not staring directly at the top of the dashboard, you can still see those warnings and react appropriately. This Volkswagen also comes with a generous amount of standard equipment. There are things like keyless entry. We've got heated front seats and outside mirrors. There's dual zone automatic climate control, which I already mentioned. Plus you get an auto dimming rear view mirror. New for 2023, base versions of this SUV also gain unique stitching on the dashboard, plus they have new bolsters that have both fabric and leatherette. S models also received a few enhancements for 2023. There's new stitching on the door panels, plus they have a redesigned center console that better caters to the needs of American customers. So basically what that means is there are new cup holders, plus they've added a wireless charging pouch here, and there are 2 USB Type-C ports, so everybody can keep their phones fully juiced. Rear seat passengers are also well cared for in this Volkswagen. Even though the rear backrest does not adjust, it's still a very comfortable seat with plenty of head and leg room for 6-foot-tall passengers. Additionally, at the rear of the center console, we've got 2 air vents and a pair of USB Type-C ports. Out and about, the best part of driving the ID.4 is probably the steering because it's unusually crisp. It's very quick on center, but it's also not nervous or jittery. And frankly, I think this feels absolutely fantastic. Surprisingly good, again, for a modern electric vehicle. Now, contrast that with the ride quality, which is not quite as nice. It's surprisingly bouncy. The vehicle does feel a little bit unsettled over roadway undulations, kind of like lower-end versions of the Ford Mustang Mach-E. There's also a surprising amount of road noise in here and wind noise. This is definitely not one of the quietest EVs that I've driven. The acceleration, of course, is perfectly fine. 201 horsepower is A-okay, but don't expect warp drive. This is perfectly fine for everyday use, and the ID.4 will scoot smartly off the line, even if it does start to feel a little bit winded at highway speeds. Unlike an EGMP-based car, there are no paddles on the steering wheel to adjust the regenerative braking. You basically get 2 different settings. You've got drive, which is sort of very little regenerative braking, or you can shift over to B, which does increase it a little bit. And this setup, I think, works fine, but I would still much prefer paddles to adjust how aggressive the braking is. Additionally, the brake pedal itself can feel a little bit robotic at times, so maybe a little bit more tuning work could be done there. And interestingly, this car has front disc brakes, but at the back they've incorporated drum brakes, which does sound very old-fashioned, but for EVs, drum brakes can actually be better because they have less drag than discs. Less drag, less friction can help improve the range. The ID Drive suite of aids comes standard in this SUV, and it includes amenities like traffic sign recognition, there's lane keeping assist, lane change assist, which is new for 2023. There's also Park Assist Plus with memory parking, another new feature. And then, of course, it includes adaptive cruise control with stop and go capability and lane centering. And I'll say that last item does work very well, pretty much comparable to other modern vehicles. Beyond all of that, the ID.4 also comes standard with parking sensors, which is fantastic to have, and then you also get automatic high beams, which is another great feature. Anyway, at this point, I think it's time we summarize the ID.4 and then talk pricing. So, here's what this VW does well and where it could be improved. The build quality inside and out is exceptionally good. The interior is comfortable and premium. The ID.4's styling is still quite elegant. The steering feels great. And finally, with the optional battery pack, this electric SUV offers good DC fast charging performance, though it is merely okay with the smaller battery. As for downsides, there are a few. I wish the regenerative braking were more adjustable, like in the EGMP cars. That infotainment system is not great. This VW's EPA estimated range could certainly be better. Many of the touch controls are not well thought out, and the ride can feel unsettled at times. So, when it comes to pricing, this SUV starts at just about $40,000, including $1,295 in destination fees, which really ain't that bad. Now, this particular example is, of course, a little bit more expensive, but not much. It checks out for $44,185, a figure that includes a single solitary option, that paint job I mentioned earlier. At the end of the day, I really want to like the ID.4 because this thing looks good, it feels reasonably premium, and it's a pretty good deal. However, I have a hard time recommending it because there are a lot of little annoyances. This vehicle feels like it's about 90% complete, but it's not quite there. And because of that reason, there are honestly better choices in the EV world than the ID.4. This right here is a Volkswagen ID.4, a handsome and premium feeling SUV. And if you're in the market for an all-electric vehicle, this could be the one for you. A new 62 kilowatt-hour battery pack is standard in this vehicle for the latest model year to help lower that base price, though unfortunately it only gets you up to 209 miles of range, which is not all that much. The good news, however, is that if you want more, an 82 kilowatt-hour battery pack is once more available, and that'll get you up to 275 miles on a full charge. Again, it's a lot better than the 62 kilowatt-hour battery, though it is a little bit short of the 300 miles we typically like to see. Rear-wheel drive ID.4s have a single permanent magnet electric motor mounted at the back axle, and that dynamo provides 201 horsepower and 229 pound-feet of torque, which is enough for decent, if not stellar, performance. All-wheel drive versions of this SUV, however, gain a second motor mounted up front, which really increases those numbers. It gets you 295 horses and 339 pounds of twist, which is enough to propel this vehicle from a standstill to 60 miles per hour in less than 6 seconds. Inside, the ID.4's cabin feels comfortable and well built. The materials are of surprisingly high quality, and some of them have been updated for 2023. These front seats are very nice. There's plenty of space both front and back for 6-foot-tall passengers, and overall there's quite a lot to like about this vehicle's cabin. But the biggest enhancement for the latest model year is right here, because a 12-inch touchscreen is now standard across the ID.4 range, and the infotainment system that runs on here has also been somewhat simplified to make it more intuitive, though this is still not one of my preferred systems that's out there. As before, we still have touch sliders on the dashboard, both for the dual-zone climate control system as well as audio volume. And when you do use these, they are surprisingly responsive, though unfortunately none of them are backlit, so you can't see them at night. And honestly, why not just have a volume knob? That's really the simplest solution. Another curious choice is right over here. We've got multimodal window switches. So instead of having 4 individual controls, we only have 2, and they will operate the front windows, but if you want to lower the rears, you've got to toggle a separate touch button. And this is fine, but it's kind of an answer to a question that nobody asked. Like, just put 4 window switches in. It's not that expensive or difficult. This Volkswagen also comes standard with plenty of driver aids, amenities like traffic sign recognition, lane keeping assist. There's parking sensors on the outside of the vehicle, plus you get adaptive cruise control with stop and go capability, as well as lane centering. You know, I've never really been able to recommend the ID.4. This vehicle's poor infotainment system, somewhat limited range, and unnecessarily weird secondary controls, among other issues, have really been its undoing. But Volkswagen promises the big changes they've made for 2024 have transformed this all-electric SUV from an also-ran into a legitimate contender. And I can see your skepticism. I didn't believe them either. Transforming the ID.4 from something to avoid into a vehicle you should embrace are numerous updates and tweaks. For starters, there's a new higher performance drive unit. It comes with the larger battery pack and increases the horsepower and range of both rear and all-wheel drive models, but more on this in a few. Inside, some of the controls have been redesigned, and more importantly, ID.4s fitted with that optional battery also gain a larger 12.9-inch touchscreen that runs an improved infotainment system. And thanks to manufacturing changes, the ID.4 is now eligible for federal tax credits, which makes its already affordable price even more appealing. Before this update, the ID.4 was very hit or miss. It did some things extremely well and fell pretty short in other areas. As for this vehicle's core strengths, though, it is very cleanly styled on the outside. I think it has, I dare say, a timeless design. I think it's pretty attractive. Additionally, this cabin is very spacious, and the use of materials and the build quality is very good. The ID.4 is also extremely comfortable. These front seats are supportive, yet also pretty soft at the same time. In this high-end all-wheel drive Pro S model, these chairs are also heated and ventilated. They adjust in 12 different directions, and of course, there is a memory function. This SUV's back bench is pretty excellent as well. There's tons of room in all directions. The floor is basically flat. The cushion height is great above the floor, and the backrest is very comfortably angled. The ID.4 also has a surprisingly generous amount of cargo room. Behind the rear backrest, you've got about 30.3 cubic feet of space, but if you drop those down, that number increases to 64.2, which is a pretty good figure. There is, however, no front trunk in this SUV, but honestly, with that much room, you probably don't really need one. Making this V-dub a great value, even the most basic trim level comes with loads of standard equipment. You get heated front seats, 10-color interior ambient lighting. We have rain-sensing windshield wipers. There's dual-zone climate control, LED headlamps, and a lot more. Plus, there's wireless smartphone mirroring for, of course, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but I'm still waiting for them to support BlackBerry and Windows Phone. Someday they're going to give us smartphone mirroring as well, and I'll tell you, look out when that happens. We're the silent majority, folks. We really are. But now for a few of the most important changes. ID.4s fitted with the larger, optional 82 kilowatt-hour battery pack also gain a new 12.9-inch touchscreen that runs an infotainment system that is far better than before. Now, there's a lot of functionality here, several different ways of doing things, but overall, this system is far more intuitive than the previous generation one, and it is super responsive. If I, for instance, bring up the navigation map here, you can see it pops up, and it just flies, pinching and zooming. There's almost no stuttering or delays. This is nearly as responsive as the Google-based system that you get in newer Volvos. It is really good. Volkswagen has done a great job with this system. It's colorful. Like I said, there are multiple different ways of interacting with this, so it's easy to get to different functions. Additionally, they've added illumination to the touch sliders on the dashboard. You've got two sliders on either side here for the temperature control, and then a volume slider in the middle. Why those weren't illuminated in the first place, I have no idea, but they do shine light at night so you can actually see them. Though, honestly, I would much prefer just having a couple knobs. That would be a much better solution, but you can't win them all. But overall, this infotainment system, it's still not one of my favorites, but it is so much better, it's not a deal breaker anymore. Another change is the position of the gear selector. If you remember, it used to sprout out from the digital instrument cluster right up here, but engineers have moved it down to the steering column where the wiper control used to be. And yes, it's easy to reach in this position, but honestly, I would much rather have a separate wiper control stalk. It's very easy to flick or lift depending on what the weather is doing. Now you've kind of got to fiddle with a toggle over here on the turn signal stalk. Additionally, we have revised touch controls here on the steering wheel. They're very responsive, plus Volkswagen has changed the labeling and layout to make everything much more intuitive, and it is a big improvement. Unfortunately, though, we do have the same silly window switches as before, where you only get two switches and then you've got to toggle between the front and back windows, and I really wish they would change this and just put 4 switches in. But you can't win them all. Anyway, let's talk about the ID.4's updated powertrain and see how this thing drives out on the road. Okay, so that new performance drive unit I mentioned earlier features a permanent magnet electric motor, and it puts out some impressive numbers. You got 282 horsepower and 402 pound-feet of torque. Now, of course, all-wheel drive ID.4s also gain a front-mounted induction motor that gets you an additional 53 horses and 99 pound-feet of torque, bringing the totals up to 335 horses and 501 pounds of twist. Pretty impressive numbers, though I will tell you, this vehicle does not feel quite as quick as those figures suggest. I'm gonna say it'll do 0 to 60 somewhere in the low 5-second range, but still, you are never wanting for performance in the ID.4 all-wheel drive. As for range, that larger 82 kilowatt-hour battery pack gets you 263 miles on a full charge, which really isn't too bad, though if you opt For a rear drive version with the big battery, you can expect 291 miles on a full charge, which is really quite impressive. Naturally, the smaller 62 kilowatt hour battery does not give you as long of legs in this vehicle. Expect about 206 miles on a full charge, along with way less horsepower and torque. So if you want better performance, definitely opt for the larger battery pack. As for DC fast charging, that small battery will top out at 140 kilowatts, which is okay, though the big one will do 175, which is pretty impressive, enough to get you from 10 to 80% in just about 30 minutes. Now, a portable charger, unfortunately, is not included with this vehicle. It's not something you're probably going to use every day, but it's still nice to have in an emergency. And if you're wondering, the ID.4 is fitted with a CCS port. Dynamically, all-wheel drive versions of this SUV have a ride height that's been elevated by 0.7 of an inch. They also feature firmer springs and have larger diameter stabilizer bars. And overall, this vehicle rides very well. It's refined and quite smooth. And I'll say it feels a lot more planted than the rear-wheel drive ID.4 I tested a few months back. That tended to bounce around quite a lot, but this is much more stable. So this ID.4's steering is very light to the touch, though oddly it feels less agile than other versions of this SUV I have reviewed. Overall, the handling is effective, but it's not particularly engaging. Unfortunately, there's no true one-pedal drive mode in the ID.4 here. Instead, what you can do is shift from D to B, which does give you enhanced regenerative braking when you lift off the accelerator pedal. There's also an auto hold function, so when the vehicle is stopped, you can press extra hard on the brake pedal, and it will keep the ID.4 from creeping forward. And combined, this gives you like 90% of the benefits of a one-pedal drive mode, though this Volkswagen will not roll itself to a stop, so be aware of that. But it's not all bad news, because Volkswagen's IQ Drive suite of advanced assistance technologies is standard across the ID.4 range, and of course this includes amenities like automatic emergency braking, there's blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, you know, the usual suspects, the stuff I talk about in like practically every video. You also get Travel Assist, which is Volkswagen's implementation of adaptive cruise control with lane centering and stop-and-go capability. Now, this is not the best implementation of this technology that I've ever experienced. The vehicle will move in its lane just a little bit, but I'll tell you, it is still very, very good. Additionally, Volkswagen has made it dead simple to switch between the various cruise control modes, because you've got adaptive cruise with lane centering, conventional adaptive cruise, and then regular old-fashioned cruise control that will not slow the vehicle down with traffic or keep it in the center of its lane. And you just press a button here on the steering wheel spoke, and it's dead simple to cycle through all of those cruise control settings. So overall, the ID.4 is pleasant to drive and surprisingly comfortable, though I will say this is not the quietest EV I have ever tested. You do get a fair amount of tire noise coming up from the road, and there's a bit of wind rush, particularly at highway speeds. Now, these things are not objectionable, though they are noticeable. But now let's recap this vehicle's strengths and weaknesses, and then of course, we gotta talk pricing. Okay, this all-electric SUV's new infotainment system is a huge step forward. I also appreciate the reworked secondary controls that are easier to use. Front or rear, the ID.4's seats are long-haul comfortable. This vehicle's on-road performance is very good. The faster charging and longer range are great news too. And it's awesome that this VW is eligible for the full federal tax credit. As for downsides, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I find the trim levels incredibly confusing. There are rear drive models and Pro grades, Pro S, and then the standard trim. It's a lot to decipher. Another knock is the ID.4's unnecessarily weird window switches. I wish a portable charger were included. And finally, this SUV's interior could be a little quieter at highway speeds. So this high-end Pro S all-wheel drive model checks out for $55,695, including $395 for that lovely Aurora red metallic paint, as well as $1,425 in destination fees. But since the ID.4 has an eligible battery pack and this thing is screwed together in Chattanooga, Tennessee, it is eligible for the full $7,500 federal tax credit, which makes this SUV an incredible value, especially the base version, which starts at right around 41 grand before any discounts. For 2024, Volkswagen has done a fantastic job refining the ID.4. Like I mentioned earlier, I've never really been able to recommend this SUV, but now I actually think it's a smart buy, even if I don't like it quite as much as, say, an eGMP car or even the Ford Mustang Mach-E. But you know, if there were an award for the most improved EV out there, it'd probably go to this ID.4. Next up, check out my full review of the 3-row Kia EV9 by clicking right over here. You know, there aren't many mainstream EVs with room for the whole family, but the EV9 checks this box and many more.